And people will drift in as they drift in. Oh, here's another one. Okay, so let's get started. We are up to our third chapter of Tikkun HaKlali. I hope that it's so far proving helpful. I know that even though I've learned through Tikkun HaKlali many times before and I've taught it, I always feel like it's good to go into the prakim again and see it all inside again and think about it and contemplate it again. And it's also making me connect better also when I'm saying my Tikkun HaKlali. So I'm very grateful to be doing the class. That's always the way it is. And that's actually part of the subject from a Breslov perspective. That's a big piece of the nature of this particular parak. This week's chapter, is very much focused on the positive effects that we have by giving over something to somebody else. So before we get into the actual language of the chapter, let's go back. We always have to keep going back to our original guidelines in Likutei Moharan, and then a little bit afterwards we have some is better explained in Parporot L'Chochma, which is a commentary on Likutei Moharan. What each type of song is, which chapter is expressing each type of spiritual song. So we already did our first chapter of chapter 16 was Bracha, Avarechet Hashem Asher Ya'atzani. This is, just to point it out, this is Likutei Moharan, second section, lesson number 92, which very briefly goes through the 10 chapters of Tikkun HaKlali and tells us which song is associated and gives us some hints, but doesn't really explicate it for us. We have to sort of discover that for ourselves. Now, let's see what we have here. So in lesson 92, we have it in front of you. Our first chapter of Tikkun HaKlali, which is 16, is Bracha. It's related to Bracha. And that was, we find that Rabbi Nachman gave us the hint. He pulled it directly out from the text. Avarechet Hashem Asher Ya'atzani, Afliyot v'chulei. And so that first chapter's, we'll say its spiritual song message was the blessing that comes from being given good, strong direction from Hashem, even if it assumes an unpleasant form. And what a blessing that is, and it's the expression of gratitude for the blessing that happens through experiencing Yisurim, having to suffer. And so that's our first one. Now, Ashrei, we said this has to do with joy, but joy that's like a forward vision kind of joy, and especially the joy that comes to a person who really knows and feels that they're doing the right thing, meaning that they're in the state of yeshrut, that they are straight on. And so Ashrei is our second chapter, and that's pretty easy to see because the opening verse is Ashrei Nisui Peshe Kesui Chata'ah. That is very clearly expressed in the chapter. You don't have to hunt for it. It's not a hint. It's right there. It's explicit. Fortunate, happy is the person who is Nisui Peshe Kesui Chata'ah. We said already, someone whose sin has been lifted off of them. Kesui Chata'ah, their errors have been sort of already covered over, but not because it's been expunged through, we'll say like, not because it's whitewashed. Quite the contrary, it's because the person has already done deep teshuva, and in having done deep teshuva, it's the expression, it's the sole expression of a kind of relief and joy in taking the straight path and taking the right path. So that's our second one. Now we're up to our third one, chapter 41. So for those who have a book of Tehillim in front of you, you might have something, maybe with a commentator or your own personal Tehillim. If you want to, sometimes people like to make little simanim or notes or something in the side. You might want to do that just to have memory. My husband, I remember when we first got married, I it's like the merging of two libraries. This is not all of our books. This is a small portion of the books. So when we got married, we had less books then, but we still had a lot of books between the two of us. And I remember what a kind of an exciting thing it was to have his Sfarim, to now be able to make use of his books, and also especially his Siddur and his Tehillim. And he has a habit, he likes to underline the stuff that really, or he underlines, or he marks with little stickers, or he likes to highlight in his books. Not everybody likes to do such things, but he does, because when something really affects him more, he wants to pay special attention to something. So he'll make a mark. And I remember what an education it was in his nature, just to know in his Tehillim, what was he, like what spoke to him? What did he, what aroused him? So that was something that I saw with him. And it's very interesting because really what he was doing in the Tehillim was following a practice that Rabbi Nachman did, which many people don't know. We have it from kind of like the oral tradition in Breslov, which is, I'm pretty sure that it's recorded in Siach Sarfi Kodesh. I don't think that it's in Chaim Moran, but I might be wrong. It could be that it's in the more standard biographical work. I have to check. I didn't think I was going to say this today, so I didn't check the source. But in discussing, actually it might be in Chaim Moran. In any case, maybe if anybody's very familiar with the work, they'll be able to tell me because I didn't look it up. But anyway, we know that from a very young age, Rabbi Nachman loved tefillot. He loved books of collections of tefillot. He loved his Siddur. He loved his Tehillim. Being, of course, a descendant of King David, he was, because he's a direct descendant from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov is directly from Rashi. Rashi is from King David. We have the whole, like from point to point in their lineage is very well established. But in any case, Rabbi Nachman from a young child loved to pray, which he said later on in life, that's part of the heritage that comes from being a child of King David, meaning a descendant from King David, who really is the expression of the spiritual power of Leah. And Leah, Leah had Yehuda, and Yehuda is the progenitor of David. And so all that force of Leah, whose real power is in her prayer, and her soft eyes, which are not weak eyes, they're Enilaya Rakot, and their highest expression comes out later in David, where it says of him, he's Yefei Einayim. Rabbi Nachman said, Yefei Einayim, what does it mean, Yefei Einayim? Is that they're soft for prayer, from prayer. And in Breslov, the eyes of a person, especially a person who comes off of the tziyun of Rabbi Nachman's gravesite after having done a good hitbodedut and a good vidui, a good confession of what's going on with them, and getting everything off of their chest. So Breslov Hasidim, as it's brought in Paporot LeChochma, very much valued what they called the ois kitrer na'egin, those cried out eyes of someone who's just come off of the tziyun, just come off of the gravesite, who finished doing their prayers there. So Rabbi Nachman loved all kinds of prayers, and it's actually remarked, I can't remember if it's in Chaim Moran or in Siach Sarfi Kodesh, please forgive me, I didn't check, but I'm pretty sure that it was in Chaim Moran, actually, now that I think about it, where he said that from a young age he loved to pray whatever he could get his hands on, and he also used to like to say the Tchina Buchen. Like I even have some here in the house, Yiddish prayers that were written for women so they would be able to understand them, either composed by women or for women, special prayers at candlelighting for Shabbos Mavorchin, for blessing the new month, for the Shabbos before the new month, for special holidays. I had an old book of Tchinas that had, it was published in the early years of the 20th century, and it included a special Tchina for a woman whose husband and her sons go out to work on Shabbos, and it was like do a whole sociological investigation on, a whole PhD on the women's prayers in the early, after immigration to America, what kind of situation it was that the observant families would be together Friday night for Shabbos. Just lost my connection. Would be there for Shabbos together, and the mother, brokenhearted, lighting candles at night, asking Hashem already preemptively for forgiveness for the husband and the sons who are going to go out to work the next day, because if not, they won't have food. And so, Tchinas. So Rabbi Nachman loved Tchinas, and he loved the Siddur Shari Tziyun also, which is full of Kabbalistic prayers, and he loved the women's prayers. He would just say anything they could get his hands on. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because one practice that he did was that sometimes he would go through the Tehillim and he wouldn't even say all of the words. He would only say, with a lot of regesh, with a lot of emotion, just those phrases that kind of jumped out at him, that spoke to him at that moment in time. So when I got married, I saw my husband's Tehillim, like he had a whole Tehillim. One of his Tehillim that he liked to use was filled with like underlines under the phrases that like spoke so powerfully to him, and he would just like jump, because and usually we would say you should say the whole pasuk. It's true, but we sort of had, we have a little bit of a kind of permission that in the relationship of prayer. So this kind of like from phrase to phrase. Rabbi Nachman himself did it when he was younger, as part of his, I don't know if you'd call it like prayer experiments or prayer adventures. So it's very just interesting, the possibilities in making use of the Tehillim. Now, when we go, so let's go back. So we're now on our Maskil. We're on our third chapter of Tikkun HaKlali. Maskil. Now, Maskil, when we look here in lesson 92, so it's very interesting. Our Maskil doesn't start off the way that we would expect, meaning instead of, this is now the first time, because both of our chapters 1 and 2 of Tikkun HaKlali, right, 16 and 32, it was very clear that the type of spiritual song, bracha or ashrei, make an appearance in the pasuk themselves. Here, when Rabbi Nachman gives us the maskil, the hint that he gives us is actually not from Tehillim at all. He says, "Umei Hashem isha maskelet." Now, "Mei Hashem isha maskelet" means, Shlomo Melech says, a wise wife comes from God. Now, that's very nice, but what on earth does it have to do with chapter 41? When we go inside and we look at chapter 1, we're not going to see anything that looks too much like a wife or wisdom of a wife, or what on earth does that have to do with anything? And we have to remember that in another lesson, which was lesson 202, Rabbi Nachman spoke about the idea of maskil and its relationship to Tikkun HaKlali, and he said sometimes it's maskil and sometimes she's mishakel, meaning he was speaking about what he calls the klipa hayidua, the particular negative spiritual burden of sexual impurity, and so he says maskil is the inversion of mishakelet, right? It means like mishakelet means to, the implication is to like to lose the children, which obviously for men has this further meaning of the power of we'll call it the negative feminine klipa, which is called lil, often referred to as lil, that she's an isha mishakelet. That means to say, causing all these children to be lost. And so this is the implication is like with having had a mikra, or like a loss of semen. So that's a type of that she's an isha mishakelet as opposed to maskelet. So the inversion of that is the idea of prayer as the agency of attaining intelligence, spiritual intelligence, that leaves one less vulnerable to the isha mishakelet. So when Rabbi Nachman brings as the hint for this chapter that the idea of maskil is best encapsulated not by a pasuk in Tehillim at all, but if we want to understand why it's so important to have this language of spiritual expression, which you think doesn't sound very expressive. What do you mean maskil? Maskil is like explaining something to somebody. Lahaskil means to give someone else intelligence, or to share intelligence with someone, or information or illumination with someone. What does it have to do with spiritual expression? So that's kind of how he's tying this in for us here with his pasuk from Mishlei. He's telling us, pay attention to what does it mean to be a maskil. The maskil is not somebody who's just stam and intellectual. He's somebody who he's making use of the Mei Hashem isha maskelet. He has something, a gift that comes from Hashem, which is the isha maskelet. The isha is a reference to tefillah. It doesn't only mean the good wise wife who gives you good advice, that's true, but it means the power of prayer. The power of prayer is maskelet, and she inverts the power of the isha mishakelet. So when we talk about the language of the maskil prayer and its spiritual expression, it means I have an opportunity with this chapter of Tehillim, chapter 41, to attain a new level of understanding or awareness, which is like an armor for me, which protects me against spiritual impurity. It's something very powerful because maskelet inverts mishakelet. Okay, so if you're with me so far, if you're still hanging in there and following, we can see now, better understand why he brings a verse that's not from Tehillim. And we're going to find later on he's going to do it again. Meaning in this lesson of Likutei Moharan, when it comes to Hodu, right, you'd think that's one of the easiest types of spiritual expression. Our Hodu chapter starts off with the word Hodu. when it comes to that, he doesn't bother telling us Hodu. That's obvious. He's going to tell us a verse from Mishlei, which is going to give us a deeper idea of the relationship between spiritual protection and spiritual expression of Hodu specifically. So it's going to come again here. There's going to be a verse from Eov. There's going to be another verse from Mishlei. So I'm just giving you a heads up. This is the first time we're encountering this. That when you see it, when people learn the lesson and they say, oh, that seems a little weird. Why is he giving us allusions when we can see right away the word, like here in our chapter 41, right at the beginning, we have the word maskil. Why do I need a verse from Mishlei? Because he's giving me a hint to better understand what is the function, or what is the we'll say how does the chapter do what it's supposed to do for me? Okay. Let's see. So now we move on. Let's look just a little bit down. You see, here we come. When it comes to Ashri Maskil El Dal, that's our chapter. So it's obvious that Mem Aleph 41, the keyword here is Maskil, but he gave us a different insight into it up above. So let's move on. And let me think. Well, I think we're going to go into the chapter, and we'll see how it works. Now, when I'm explaining this parak, okay, as I explain it, I'm telling you, first of all, a sort of basic shot understanding. I don't know whether people are very familiar, whether you guys are super familiar with the verses or not. And so I'm sort of going to give a general, as we go through, I'll give you like level understanding of the pasuk, and by the way, of each pasuk, according to the standard understanding of the Rishonim, which mean the classic Jewish commentators. And I'm not going to give you like a super big range, because you can just go out and continue to study, and if you want to learn all of the Malbim through, or learn all of Rashi and Mitzudot through, or Rav Hirsch, or so on, and the Radak, there are so many options. I'm just giving you a basic idea of how to read psukim so that they're familiar and comfortable with you. Even if you happen to have a translation and you're saying them with a translation, it's still important to understand the language and how it's expressing what it expresses. So that's number one. But after that, we're going to look at what Reb Nosson has to say, and in this particular case, what Rabbi Nachman says, because he has a short lesson on something very important in this verse, in the chapter, and get a more of a Breslov perspective on it. Now, I want to tell you that, to begin with, every chapter, the Radak tells us, has many different levels upon which it's understood. And I might have said this in the first class, but it's important now at this point. I think it's important to reiterate it if it hasn't been made clear enough. We have the chapter, every chapter of Tehillim has its particular application that it meant and the time that it was written by the person by whom it was written. So David HaMelech had a kind of historic reality that he was experiencing in his life at the time that he composed every chapter of his Tehillim. He didn't write all of the chapters of Tehillim, we know that, but his chapters of Tehillim. So when he composed them, they are specific prayer means of addressing the specific issues that he was facing personally in his life at that moment in time. That is relevant. That's one level. Then we have David HaMelech's Ruach HaKodesh, right? His spirit of prophecy, or what we would call the divine spirit, whatever you want to call it. So it's not exactly prophecy, but it's close. So that's why a book like this, or a book like Mishlei, or a book like Kohelet and the Megillot and so on are incorporated into Tanakh, is because the sages determined, and they had long discussions about certain of the books, whether they were written indeed with Ruach HaKodesh or not, and all of that is discussed in the Gemara in Bava Basra, around page 14 or so. Long discussions about how did they know how to incorporate, or which books to incorporate into our Tanakh, our what we call the Chaf Daled Kishutei Kala, the 24 adornments of the bride, the 24 adornments of the Shechina, and so we have 24 books, and they are a closed set. Now, when we have the Tehillim were written by Ruach HaKodesh, it means that they're not just the personal expression of David HaMelech. They were written with the Shechina speaking through him. And so the words that he expressed, or the other authors of Tehillim, or other books that are included in Nach, meaning not the prophets, but the Ketuvim, were written by Ruach HaKodesh. It means, especially Tehillim, that they were addressing transpersonal issues. meaning David HaMelech or the other authors, they're addressing in their own personal expression. We have multifaceted texts that address multiple issues or multiple levels all at one time. And so we have references or hints to the future of the Jewish people, to events take place in the future, like, very famously, Chaf Bet, it's going to be Purim soon, so Lam Natech Alayel Tashachar, right? We have the chapter that's Alayel Tashachar. Now, that was written by David, but it was a reference, and it touched upon, with Ruach HaKodesh, the story of Esther, which didn't take place for many, many years later. So we have the current, we'll say like the historic psalm, we have the prophetic psalm that's speaking about some person or event in the future of the Jewish people and has relevance on that level. And the Radak tells us also every psalm speaks to the personal situation of every single Jewish soul as it goes through whatever it has to go through in this world. So when David HaMelech is speaking about his enemies and those who hate him, and those who want to triumph over him, and those who wish that he was dead, what are we supposed to make of when we come across prakim like this, which are many in Tehillim? Well, on the personal level, meaning when I, like as the individual saying the parak now, so if I was fully in touch with the degree to which my own soul goes through such suffering and confusion and suppression in this world, if I was really attuned to that, so then I would feel very, very comforted by being able to use David HaMelech's, or whatever, whoever they are, but the Tehillim themselves, to make use of them as soul expressions for me, because I have many enemies within and without. I have many enemies that beset me. I have a Yetzer that wants me dead. Like that's this David HaMelech struggles are not far from me when I realize that it is speaking the truth of my soul. So on that, on that note, let's kind of go into the parak and understand the two different ways, or, well, let's say I'm going to only address it from two different ways, even though we could really do three, but let's say two, the two levels that we're going to examine it at today. So, Lam Natseach Mizmor LeDavid. Now, this starts off with, its first is the Lam Natseach. And Mizmor LeDavid is important for us to realize, because sometimes Lam Natseach means to the choir master, as if it's an instructive to the choir master. That's the Menatzeach. But Lam Natseach is also, like Rav says, right, we're offering a psalm to Hashem, who is the Menatzeach, the one who grants victory. So whenever we come across in Tehillim this opening phrase, Lam Natseach, we should remember this is a song to the one with the capital O, who grants victory, right? He's Menatzeach, the one who gives victory. It's a causative verb. Mizmor LeDavid. Now sometimes in Tehillim, it's David, LeDavid, Mizmor. And sometime, in fact, the previous parak, chapter 40, is LeDavid, Mizmor. And now it's reversed to Mizmor, LeDavid. And so the sages taught us that this is actually part of, this expresses the difference in the way prophecy flows, or Ruach HaKodesh, or the Shekhinah starts to speak through the prophet, or the Baal Ruach HaKodesh. How does that happen? Sometimes it's LeDavid, Mizmor, and sometimes it's Mizmor, LeDavid. What's the difference between the two of them? If we have LeDavid first, Mizmor, it means there's David first. And he does whatever he needs to do to arouse himself into a state through his speaking and through his prayer, to arouse himself into a state where it was possible for the Shekhinah to rest upon him. So that's called LeDavid, Mizmor. First comes David, doing what he needs to do to bring himself into a state of readiness to receive the voice of the Shekhinah. And then Mizmor, then comes the song. And in this case, it's not like that. In this case, it starts off, Mizmor LeDavid. First came the Hashra'ah, we say in Hebrew. This is, I'm telling you, from the Malbim. First came the Hashra'ah. First came the Spirit of God descending upon him. And then he opened his mouth and he just started already from the beginning to speak in the state of divine inspiration. From the beginning of the chapter, right now we're up to Pasuk Bet, second verse. Ashrei maskil el dal, b'yom ra'ah yimaltehu Hashem. Now Ashrei, here's another Ashrei. Our chapter 32, we discovered, is a different kind of Ashrei. Right here, in this case, that was considered to be the higher expression of the more clear expression of the spiritual song Ashrei, right? Ashrei Nesui Pesha Kesui Chata. Now we have another chapter that begins with Ashrei, but Rabbi Nachman tells us no, this doesn't express Ashrei in as much as it expresses Maskil. Now, Maskil, I already told you, is from the word Sechel, right? That root, the Sin, the Kaf, and the Lamed. So we have there, maybe I could blow it up a little bit more, make it a little bit easier. Oh, that didn't do it. Let's see if that will do it. A little bit bigger, not much. All right. Hope everybody's with me. Not getting feedback. Either that's a good sign or it's not a good sign. Okay. Ashrei Maskil Eldal. I see someone's being kind enough to write in. Okay. Ashrei Maskil Eldal. B'yom ra'im al Hashem. Now, happy or fortunate is the Maskil Eldal. So here the emphasis in this chapter, which expresses the spiritual song of Maskil, that's what's being expressed here mainly, not the Ashrei. Let's see what it means. Maskil is from the language of Sechel, which means intelligence, and it's a causative. La Haskil is not the same as, well, I mean, we use it, actually the truth is, we use the word La Haskil to understand something, to know it. But if we're going to be sticklers on the way the verb works, so Maskil is a verb that's is like one doing the verb on another. So Maskil gives us the impression, especially since the phrase immediately following is Maskil Eldal. Obviously it's directional, to the poor. Fortunate or happy is the one who gives, who is Maskil Eldal, who is wise to the poor. That's a strange, or is intelligent to the poor. What does that mean? Well, first of all, we could go and understand it like on the strict level that David HaMelech here, he was very ill. He was recovering actually, or not yet quite recovered from a very severe illness, during which his physical pain and suffering was from actually having had poison, having taken something that was poisonous, which is also discussed. It comes up in Perek Lamed Chet, I think, in 38 is also alluded to there, the same period of his life. So he had many enemies, and he had taken, I don't know if it was given to him or he had taken it inadvertently, but something affected him ill. And because of that, his enemies were rejoicing over the fact that it seemed like he was not long for this earth. So the people who came to visit him, he's really in this chapter on the pshat level, just on the straightforward level. We have here a story of physical suffering compounded by the emotional abuse that his visitors visit upon him when they come to see him. And he is attuned to the fact that they are not really visiting because they want to alleviate his pain. They're visiting because they want to gloat over the fact that he's suffering and he might not survive. And so it's acutely it's acutely, I don't know, painful, because there's physical suffering compounded by, what we say, like adding insult to injury, right? So that's on the pshat level. That's what's going on here. Then the first part of the perek, David HaMelech just gives praise and lauds the person who when he finds another person suffering, is able to really understand what that person needs. Whether it's someone who is dal because he has no money. Dal usually means dal ve'evyon, like he's just impoverished. So he's maskil el dal. David HaMelech is saying, Ashrei, happy, fortunate is the person who has enough sense. That's the maskil. He is sensitive and seeks out with intelligence and discretion. He's able to seek out what the other needs, whether the person is suffering financially, or he's dal, that's in the sense of he's suffering physically, like he's been brought low. So that person is praiseworthy. And obviously this is coming from the place David HaMelech being in the state of suffering now and not having someone like that in his life. And so he turns, he hasn't yet turned directly to Hashem upward to ask for help. He's just contemplating and kind of blessing in advance the person, anybody who will treat others better than he is being treated right now. B'yom ra'ah yamalteu Hashem. Now, there are a few different ways of reading this. We can either say that these are the kinds of phrases that someone who's going to be mevakir cholim, if you're going to visit the sick, or you're trying to console somebody who's suffering, doesn't matter what kind of suffering it is. So we have a kind of, not stock phrases, but a few suggestions, perhaps, as to what one might say to be mechazik, to give encouragement to someone who's suffering. One of them is, B'yom ra'ah yimalteu Hashem. On a really bad day, you'll see that Hashem he'll save you, right? Hashem will save the person. The dal. Okay, so in that sense, it means that we're reading over the maskil el dal, the one who's trying to give and console the person who's suffering. These are the kinds of things he might say. B'yom ra'ah yimalteu Hashem. Hashem yishmeru v'chayehu. Hashem will give him life, will protect him, and he will eventually be happy and whole in the earth. It means he ushar ba'aretz, al titnei b'nefesh oivav. He's not going to let him be taken by the souls of his enemies, etc. So that's one way of understanding it, but that's not in Breslov. That's not the way that we normally focus on the parak. It's important to know it, because it can be read that way also. And some days you may open your Tehillim and that's the way you want to read it. That's the way you need to understand it for that day. So that's fine. There's nothing illegitimate about that, quite the contrary. But to be able to move in the Tehillim in a flexible way and understanding, sometimes I see it like this, and sometimes I'm going to read it like that. It's not cut and dried. It's just possibilities. Now, when the way that we would, I would say we, but like the way that it's often read, is instead to focus on the fact that all of these phrases, once you get past dal, right, let's say until here, until the end of Pasuk Daled, we're really talking about, not about the person who's suffering, but about the one who has intelligently attempted to alleviate the suffering. And so all of these blessings and all of these assurances that David HaMelech is offering is really for the person who's trying his best to offer consolation and see to the needs of the other. B'yom ra'ah yimalteu Hashem. On a bad day. It's like funny, right? Is there such a thing as a bad day? Yes. Apparently David HaMelech tells us there is such a thing as a bad day. And like Shlomo HaMelech says, B'yom tov hayeh b'tov, v'yom ra'ah re'eh. It says in Kohelet, on a good day, right? On the good day, so go with it. B'yom ra'ah, and on the bad day, re'eh. Re'eh means, re'eh there is written with an aleph. It means contemplate or think about it. It means to say you have to reflect. On the day where everything is good, so you flow, just go with the good and enjoy it and revel in it. But on Yom Ra'ah, it's time to reflect when what we call the bad day comes. Now, obviously, in Hashem's calculus, is there anything that's really called a bad day? But that's not the point. Tehillim is speaking from the place of how we experience things and trying to uplift us to a state of higher consciousness so that we experience the bad day also as the good day. Meaning, B'yom Ra'ah, Yimalteu Hashem. On what we would normally call bad day, Hashem will save us. Now, that's for, who is this a blessing for? For the maskil el dal, not for the dal, not for the person who's suffering, but for the one who, when he's doing well, he goes out of his way to try and alleviate the sufferer's pain. And then, when that person when things were going well for him, he went out of his way to try and help somebody else, then we say, when he has a bad day, Yimalteu Hashem. Someone will come to his aid, but who comes to his aid on that day? Hashem comes to his aid. Meaning what goes around, comes around. You don't have to think that if you're going to extend yourself for somebody else, then when you need it, you're not going to have the resource afforded to you. No, that's not true. B'yom ra'ah yimalteu Hashem. When you need it, Hashem also has many agents to be able to help you. Just like you went out of your way for somebody, He'll go out of His way for you. Hashem yishmereu v'chayehu v'ushar ba'aretz. Hashem will protect him. Who? The one who has the maskil, not the dal, the maskil, v'chayehu, and enliven him, will give him chayis, will give him life and vitality. Who? The maskil, v'ushar ba'aretz, and he'll dwell securely and be happy in the earth. V'al titnei b'nefesh oivav, and he's not going to be destroyed by his enemy. Hashem yisadenu al eres devai. Hashem will support him. Yisadenu means to support. Al eres devai, on his sickbed. Kol mishkavo hafachta b'choyo. Now we have a lot of switching back and forth between second person and third person here. It goes back and forth because we speak about Hashem's about Hashem in the third person, and then we speak in the second person, right? Kol mishkavo, all of the maskil who one day does suffer. Kol mishkavo, his sickbed, hafachta Hashem, you will have overturned it and made him healthy again, b'choyo, when he was sick. So you will have overturned that for him. So we have a kind of vision of the good that comes to a person who is not afraid to extend himself when someone else is suffering. Now, Asher Maskil Al-Dal, in terms of this chapter and Rabbi Nachman's teachings, it is probably the most important verse. So let's look over to Likutei Halachot. Actually, it's Likutei Moran. It's a different lesson, Likutei Moran, and see what it says here. Now, there's a few different teachings on this, but I'm going to choose the one that I prefer, because that's my prerogative. The Asher Maskil Al-Dal is the second verse. Here, Mem Aleph, Pasuk Bet. Now, this lesson is from the Likutei Moran itself, lesson 106 in the first section. Asher Maskil Al-Dal biyom ra yimalteu Hashem. Fortunate is the one who gives intelligence or shares wisdom or understanding with the sufferer. On a bad day, Hashem will save him. Will save whom? The one who is the maskil, right? Hainu. Kshehu b'katnut hamochin. When a person is in a state of katnut hamochin, that means when one's mind is really closed, not able to see the big picture, and everything is mitzik. It's like you're in a box, and you can't understand your situation, and everything is causing distress. Ki ein ani ela min hadat. When a person is dal, what does it mean when we say the person is poor in this verse? It means he's poor in dat. He's poor because he has katnut hamochin, because his consciousness is limited. And that's really why people suffer. And Rabbi Nachman, whenever he starts talking like this, we have to bear in mind, he's not speaking from a place of not knowing what suffering was. He did not have an easy life. He lost a lot of children. He lost his wife young. And then he was ill with very virulent tuberculosis for years until he died himself quite young. So, I just had a birthday, so I just keep going back to the idea, like, I'm at this point 8 years older than Rabbi Nachman was when he passed away. It doesn't make any sense how very young he was when he left this world. So he was no stranger to suffering. He suffered in body and he suffered in spirit. And when he tells us over and over again, the main suffering is the lack of da'at. The reason why people suffer, and he acknowledges, he says, like they say in the rooms of AA, pain is necessary and suffering is optional. So it's like, pain is unavoidable. It's just part of life. It exists. So he says, pain, okay, we understand. Sometimes there's pain that you can't avoid, but suffering is an existential state. That's something Rabbi Nachman pointed out. And it has to do with your state of mind, which is different than pain. Those are two separate realities. And he speaks about this quite a lot. So when I hear it from him, I can take it from him because I know that he was speaking not from a place of privilege, he was speaking from a place of great pain. Even though he was privileged in many ways, and he was privileged to have great mochin. And that's the biggest privilege of all, which is exactly what he's talking about. When a person is able to keep his mind on the greatness of God, and that everything is absolutely necessary for the rectification of his soul, and that this world is gone so quickly, and we have the big world to wait for. And that's called having the big mochin, big mind, expanded consciousness. When a person's consciousness is expanded, so then the suffering is not there. Pain might be there, but the suffering is not. So he tells us, in ani element adat. Who are we talking about? Who's the dal here? A person who has katnut mochin, who has no perspective, who has no awareness. Umaskil atzmo legadlut mochin. Now he says, umaskil atzmo legadlut hamochin. This is a very powerful idea. He says, he forces himself into a state of mochin de gadlut. Azai biyom ra yimalteu Hashem nimtakin kol hadinim. Now, v'im lo yachol. Now let's say, but most people can't do that. And Rabbi Nachman acknowledges it. Most people are not capable of drawing themselves up to a state of greater expanded consciousness when they're suffering. It's very difficult for them. So what does he do? Lo yachol b'atzmo lava legadlut hamochin. Right, that's where we are right here. He's not able to achieve this by himself. So what does he do? Itzal hazeh shiyaskil acherim v'al yedei zeh nitura gam mitzlo. He should find somebody else to help, because you can always find someone who has smaller mochim than you have. No matter how much you're struggling with a particular situation, you can always, and if you ask Hashem, He'll send you somebody pretty quickly usually. I mean, the person will show up who needs something like the help that you need, but in enough of a diluted form that you're able to help them. You may not be able to help yourself have gadlut hamochim, to not suffer, because you're in the middle of something that's very difficult. But Hashem will send you somebody who needs your help, who can receive from you the limited amount of mochim that you have, which compared to her mochim are so small that what you have to share is already called gadlut, because it's all relative. So what happens? You give and you share and you help this other person. That's called etzalazeh sheyaskil achirim. And this helps our own mochim to wake up, so that we're able to also come out of our suffering. We know in the Gemara Nedarim it says that there's no poverty like poverty of the mind, poverty of consciousness. Right? So that's what it means to come across the dal, the person who's lacking. What is he lacking? What is she lacking? The main thing to be lacking is that. And so it's a place of a great arousal of compassion on the other when you see somebody struggling. And you can identify with their struggle because you struggle too. So go ahead and help that person. You can't say, and here Rabbi Nachman is telling us, you're not supposed to, don't assume that just because you have your struggles that you don't have what to give to somebody else. Quite the contrary. Ashrei maskil eldal. If you'll take what you have, even if it's limited, and you'll share it, whatever that awareness is, that gadlut hamochin, whatever it might be, relative to the other person. So it's going to open up your mind, and it's going to open up channels that you'll be able to also experience greater gadlut hamochin. Ashrei maskil eldal, b'yom ra'a yimalteu Hashem. Then the person finds, then you find, after having done this, that when you're really in a pickle, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you come out of your state of constricted consciousness, of small consciousness. And I have found this to be so. I mean, I'm a teacher and I deal with people all the time. And I have found every time that I have a real struggle, Hashem, immediately sends me somebody who's struggling differently than I am, but similar enough that I'm able to share with them whatever 2 steps I might be ahead of them in their particular struggle. Maybe I'm only 2 steps or 1 step. But I have something to share with them that they don't have themselves, and that is mechazik me. That helps me, and it's very much like in the recovery model. Like you know, how are you supposed to stay lahavdil? But how are you supposed to what's better? What's the best way for a drunk to stay clean, to stay sober? He's got to go help somebody else, right? The drunk saves another drunk, and in that way he saves himself. So this is a model that, like from a Breslov perspective, from Nachman's perspective, as soon as we hear or see that model, we say, oh, we understand why this works. Because it's called Ashrei Maskil Eldal B'yom Ra'a Yimalteu Hashem. Okay, let's go back. Now, we have our, let's go back to our chapter. So we have a whole host of blessings, David HaMelech tells us, comes to the person who goes out of his way or goes out of her way to share what she can with the person who suffers, who's like a few steps behind, right? Who's just a couple, may even be just literally 1 step behind. But that is a salvation for the both of them. It's not just for the sufferer, it's for both of them. Ani amarti. Now, here we have a break. From here until basically the end, till the last verse, we have from Psukim 5 until 13, we basically have David HaMelech now speaking very directly about how he managed and what he had to do. When he was on his own, he didn't have anybody to help him. Ani amarti, at that time, meaning, and as for me, why does he have to say ani? He means because as for me, because I didn't have someone to do this for me. And I was stuck in my bed and I was suffering, and the people who came to me didn't know how to give to me, and they didn't want to give to me. Ani amarti, Hashem chaneni. I said, as for me, who did I have to turn to help me? Hashem chaneni. Have mercy on me. Have compassion on me, God. Why? Because I didn't have human beings to have recourse to. Refa'a nafshi ki chatati lach. Heal my soul. Ki chatati lach. Now again, even though we're understanding it on the level, it's like dual levels at once. David HaMelech's own personal experience, and then as we say this chapter of Tehillim, what does it mean to me? Ani amarti Hashem chaneni. Here I am in my struggle right now. Remember, this is Ashrei. This is a maskil. We're getting words of wisdom and concepts, a concept or a framework, a mental framework that saves us, that we're able to reach out to, so that we are saved from the places where we can fall. And that's called the maskil, the isha maskelet, the prayer that saves us, the intelligent prayer, as opposed to the isha mishakelet, right? As opposed to the klipa that wants to squash us and crush us, right? And take away our vitality. So we have instead the isha maskelet. So here David HaMelech says, Ani amarti Hashem chaneni. Hashem, I begged of you, chaneni, have mercy on me, have compassion on me. Rifa'a nafshi ki chatati lach. Please heal my soul, because I acknowledge the only reason why I'm suffering is because I sinned against you. This is already, it means David HaMelech is not asking for, I'm not asking for help on the basis of, as if I deserve it. Quite the contrary. I turn to Hashem and I say, Ribono shel olam, I know that my healing, what I need, is coming only from you, because the only reason why I'm suffering is because I sinned against you. It's about you and me, and it's not about all these other people, and it's not about what I ate, and it's not about what I drank, and it's not about what virus I got. You know, it's like that's the old joke, right? It's not a joke. You say, I got a virus, right? You're sick. Oh, I'm sick. What'd you have? I have a virus. So my father always says, no, the virus, right? That's the virus, right? Is the virus, right? So where does the suffering come from? The suffering or the pain is coming from the place David HaMelech acknowledges right away. If my relationship with you, Hashem, was 100%, then I wouldn't be in this position. Oivai, and now imagine David HaMelech lying in the bed, and he's looking around, and he sees a crowd of people around him coming to visit him. And in visiting him, what are they really doing? They're gloating over him. Oivai yamru rali, tayamud vavad shmo. My enemies, they kind of gather around me, and they yamru rali, they speak evil of me. Li here really means alai. They attribute my suffering to the fact that I deserve it. Now, it's two different things, right? Here we have David HaMelech saying right here, chatati lach, I do deserve it, obviously, right? It's between you and me. But my enemies, their ideas of what I have done wrong and their judgment on me, I say that's one thing. They're just being malicious. I am doing my self-judgment in order to clean house. They don't have the right to do that to me. I need to clean my conscience with you, Hashem, not with these people. Matayamut vavad shmo, like they're saying, oh, when he's going to drop dead already. And vavad shmo, not only do we want him off the face of the earth, but also all of his legacy. That means his shame. When will his name be lost? It means anything that he might have left in the world, we also want to see gone off the face of the earth. And when we say this parak, it's like, again, we hear it as it affected David and how it was an expression of his own experience. And then it's the expression of our own experience. I have enemies. Who are my enemies and what are my enemies? I have internal enemies and external enemies, right? Now, I'm not going to focus so much on the external, but we'll just say the spiritual enemy, which is my own Yetzer. It's like cackling over me. You know, it's just like, don't get out of bed, right? Just stay there paralyzed and immobile. In Balir Ot, and if he comes to visit, right, it means to say my enemy comes to visit. He doesn't come to visit. What is he doing? He comes Lir Ot. He comes to put his eyes on me and see. He doesn't want to see me well. He wants to see me ill. Shav Yedaber. Whatever he says, it's a bunch of nonsense, it's lies. He comes in and he says, oh, how are you doing? I was just checking up on you. And meanwhile, what he really is saying is shav. It's like he's using a false front of friendly words, but really what's going on inside of his heart? Libo yikbatz avenlo. His heart is gathering and collecting to itself iniquity. That means to say all of his bad judgments that he has on me and all of his bad feelings about me. Yetzeh lechutz. He goes outside. What does he do? Yedaber. As soon as he leaves my presence, he goes out to speak with the other people who feel the same way about me. And they stand outside my room, outside the building, and they talk and talk because really they all have it in for me. And David HaMelech was not paranoid. He really did have enemies who wanted to see him gone. And they were powerful people So when he expresses this distress before Hashem, Ribono Shel Olam, who can I rely on? We have to realize his vulnerability. He lies there in bed. Imagine, David HaMelech, the king of the Jewish people. He lies there in bed. He's at the mercy of all of these people. And he doesn't appeal to them. And we see this process with David HaMelech time after time. He says to Hashem, and I'm not going to bow down to them. And I'm not going to appeal to them. And I'm not going to trust in them. I'm going to trust only in you and only turn to you, Hashem, because I know that it's only you in whom I can rely. Again, let's go back outside. We have the image of David HaMelech in the bed, and then outside, what does he have? Sonai, yitlachashu kol sonai. They all gather together as one. Yachad, alai, upon me. Yitlachashu kol sonai. They start to whisper about me, all my enemies. Alai yachshavu rali. They're plotting against me. They're plotting harm. Ra'ali. They're plotting harm against me all the day long. Dvar b'liyal yatzukbo. What do they say about me? Dvar b'liyal yatzukbo. He's such a. It's like he got what he deserved. Yatzuk is yitzika is when you take metal and you smelt it, and you form something with it, a solid with it. So form something with it. So it's sort of like yatzukbo. It's like it's what we say in Hebrew. It's tafur alav, right? It's like the thing is like unavoidable. He's stuck with it. So dvar b'liyal yatzukbo. David HaMelech is imagining the words of his enemies. They say like, oh, this disease that he got, this illness that he's suffering. Well, Magi alo. He deserves it. Yatzukbo. It's like tafur alav. It's like perfectly suited to him. Vasher, as if it's been like soldered to him. Vasher shechav, and they make all kinds of negative predictions. They catastrophize. And now that he's lying down, it means to say now that he's immobilized, he's in bed, lo yosif lakum. He's never going to get up again. Now, again, I'm just telling you personally. When we read this, it's sort of like David HaMelech is very, very clearly articulating the way in which our Yetzer works on us. It's like we have to acknowledge we have a part of ourselves that it's like it wants to see us fail. It wants to see us immobile. It wants to see us not come out of whatever bad place we're in at this moment in time. Remember, the theme of this chapter is Ashrei Maskil El Dal. How are you going to get out of the place of Katnut HaMuchin? How to get out of the place of the suffering of restricted and constricted consciousness. When you're in that state, it's like there is some part of you that just wants to stay there. That's what David HaMelech is addressing it. Gam ish shlomi asher batachti bo. Even the person that I trusted, that's ish shlomi, my ally, my friend, my so-called friend, asher batachti bo, I put a lot of trust in him. Ochel lachmi. He eats my bread. That means to say he's my intimate friend. Higdil alei akev. He uplifted or raised his heel against me. That means to say, like, literally, it's such a vivid image, like to crush me. The person that I thought was going to be my batachtibo, I trusted in him. I looked to him for security. And what did it turn out? That he's totally against me. It's not the place I could trust. Vata, now we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? He turns to Hashem. He says, Vata Hashem chaneni vakimeni. Now realizing this, even the person, not just enemies, but ish shlomi, the person that I was close with, my intimate friend, that I really put a lot of confidence in, even he turned against me. So David HaMelech, it's like this is a healing process. He says, where do I find the consolation that I require? Where will I get the chayus and the vitality and the strength that I require in order to be able to pick myself up again and start over again? From whom can I receive this? Only from you, Hashem. Vata Hashem chaneni vakimeni. And you, Hashem, chaneni. Again, this word chaneni. Now, what does chaneni mean in Hebrew? Chaneni is from the language of chinam. Chanina means to appeal to or to beseech. Chaneni means to have compassion on me. But we say it means I'm appealing to your capacity to provide for me the matnat chinam. Chinam means something that I don't necessarily deserve. I'm asking for a free gift. You have a treasury of free gifts. That's the treasury of unearned gifts. It's called the Otzar Matnat Chinam. Hashem has on high. That means to say He does good even to people who don't necessarily deserve it. He is generous even to people who are not so, who haven't been perfect little lambs. And so when we use the term chaneni, right, asking for chanina or chanun, etc., that kind of language. So Vayet Chanan, it's very famous. Rashi brings it down over there in Vayet Chanan. So the first Rashi in Vayet Chanan. So we have Chaneni Vakimeni. Hakimeni means uplift me, like get me back up on my feet. But I'm asking for this gift. I know you can do it, Hashem. I'm asking it as a matnat chinam, not because I'm deserving, not because I'm in a better place, or that I'm, that I fully cleansed myself out, because I'm very debilitated right now. And we said this is the chapter of Ashrei Maskil Eldal. This is the chapter for the person who's in a state of katnut muchin. He's not really himself. He needs a lot of compassion from outside because he's in the state of dalut. He's depleted in terms of his consciousness. And that's where it really comes from. So he says, Ata Hashem chaneni vakimeni vashalma lehem. I'm going to pay them back. If you'll uplift me and you'll bring me to a state of wholeness again, you'll get me up on my feet again, I'll repay them. Now, what does it mean to repay them? Hashalma lehem. It sounds like he's going to take vengeance. We find very often, it's important to realize, David HaMelech's path is never to take vengeance. He's always saying, Hashem, just get me well, just get me out of this, and you will take care of them, and I'll sing your praises. We have that kind of theme recurring all throughout Tehillim. When it says Hashalma lehem, it's very interesting. In what way is he going to pay them back? Well, the biggest payback is to succeed, meaning they want to see him fail. Hashalma lehem. I'll pay them back. The biggest punishment that I could possibly give or bring upon them is that I should get up healthy and well, strong, empowered by you, Hashem, to continue to go about doing the thing that you want me to do in this world and pay no attention to them whatsoever. B'zot yadati ki chafatzta bi. With this, and that means the recovery, right? What he said here. Hakimeni, get me up out of bed. Restore me to myself. B'zot, when I see that happen, that's called zot. When that thing happens, yadati ki chafatzta bi, then I'll know that you truly want me, because you will have done the work for me. You will have done the thing for me that I cannot do for myself. Ki lo yaria oivi alai. You're not going to allow my enemy to be Maria alai. Now, yaria has two main ways in which it can be understood. The first one is, it's like the language of truah, like a shofar, that you blow the shofar, do, 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 and it's a kind of triumphant sound, a triumphant blast. And so David HaMelech says, when you get me out of this, and you bring me to a state of physical Hashalma lehem. Well, no, ashli mitam. It is not understood. It's a good question to make peace with them. Even though shalom and l'shalem are from the same root, in this case, it does not mean that, because it's Hashalma lehem. Now, if you wanted to read it that way, I wonder if you could. I'm going to see if I can find a source that supports that, but so far I have not seen it. It's a good question. It means the payback, but the payback doesn't have to be a vengeful payback. It can just be, this is the best way I can possibly put them to shame. Yeah, it's a good question. My enemy is not going to be blowing the trumpet triumphantly over my downfall, but Yariya is also from the language of Ra. And here we do have, one second, just quickly, a quick run to, let's see, here. Yeah, Bezot yadati ki chafatzta bi. Kilo Yaria Oivi. This is again from Sichot Aran, also direct teaching from Ben Nachman. Bezeh shoivim shli enam ra'im, ki tzadikim cholkim alai. Bezot yadati ki chafatzta bi. This speaks very much to Rabbi Nachman's own situation. He says, here Yaria can be read as Ra. They are not bad people. My enemies are actually tzadikim. And in his own life, Rabbi Nachman had a lot of controversy on him. And Rabbi Nassan also did. Suffered under a lot of false accusations, etc. And but his enemies were not, his so-called enemies were not bad people. They were actually tzaddikim. And he speaks in many places, not just in Sichot Aran, about the fact that when Hashem sends someone to oppose them, because many tzaddikim have to face opposition. So when Hashem sends them an opponent who's a worthy opponent, meaning not an evil opponent, but a tzaddik who is engaged with him in machloket l'shem shamayim, machloket, controversy for the sake of heaven. So this is already, Rabbi Nachman says, this is already part of the consolation, right? B'zeh shoivim sheli enam ra'im. The fact that my enemy, and he's speaking about himself, that those who, they're tzaddikim cholkim alai, they are righteous people, the ones who have issues with me. B'zot yadati ki chafatzta bi. This is itself a good sign that you love me and that you haven't sent me. My opponents are not wicked people. So that. This is Rabbi Nachman speaking from his own experience because he really did have to face a great deal of opposition. Let's quickly finish up. Now, for me, just personally, when I say the Tehillim, Bezot Yadati, it's such a powerful statement to make. Bezot Yadati ki chofatzta bi, ki lo yari oivi alai. I have so many internal obstacles, Hashem. When I call out to you and I see you're gonna, when you take me out of it, and they will not triumph over me. It means to say, my midot ra'ot, my ta'avot, the lower parts of myself, which is really those are my enemies. So my lower parts of myself, that they're not like, dancing the hora on my over my spiritual, over my, stomping all over me and making kazatskas on me. So that's called bezot yadati ki chofatzta bi, like if you'll just be kind to me, Hashem, and empower me to be able to overcome myself, and not allow my oivim, my internal enemies, to dance all over me. So that's a sign of favor, Hashem, and I appreciate it. Vani betumi tamachta bi. And as for me, that's again that same va'ani, right? Betumi tamachta bi. You supported me betumi. All the while that I remained in a state of tmimut, kind of like a spiritual integrity and simplicity. That's when you supported me and support me. V'tatziveni lefanecha liolam. And you uplift me, and you will uplift me and stand me up straight and strong before you forever. So the key here, David HaMelech says, I have to stay in the state of tom, maintain my spiritual integrity, not get too complicated, and keep it simple with you, and just stay focused on appealing to you and not relying on other people. Be'ezras Hashem, I'll come out of the bad place. Hold on, Higdil Alei Akev. Yes. Higdil Alei Akev, the image there that's brought down in the, just from the Rishonim, is the idea of the person that I trusted uplifted he picked up his foot as if he was going to crush me down with his heel. Meaning he made me into a snake, like he's the issue, that it's like the image of like this, he's made me into he's treating me like vermin, right? Which is like to crush me with the heel. Last pasuk, and of course we end off with praise, because now, as is usual, very, very rare for any other end of a parak of Tehillim, David HaMelech, even if he's still in the mess, he ends off almost always, with a very rare exception, on a note of joy and triumph, because even if he's not out of it yet, he is fully confident that he's going to get out of the bad situation. Baruch Hashem Elokei Israel, blessed is Hashem, the God of the Jewish people, Me'al Olam, V'ad Olam, Amen V'Amen. From this world to the next world, it means in both worlds forever and ever, Amen V'Amen. And this is actually the end of what we call Sefer Rishon. This is the end of the first book of Tehillim, when it's broken up into 5 books. So it's also kind of finalizes right there, because it's the end of book 1. And I think this is the end of our class. So thank you for tuning in, and Bezrat Hashem, we will continue next week with chapter 42. B'simcha rabah. Oh, I didn't drink any tea the whole time. Okay. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you next week, Bezrat Hashem.